Hello everyone, welcome back to Professor Hancock's English videos. This video here, I like to use this talk about Edgar Allan Poe to fit into, I've worked on it with my Comp 2 course, my World Lit 2 course, and my American Lit 1 course. And whichever class you're in, this will fit perfect for you. So I want to go ahead and talk just a moment about Poe and what we need to be looking for in his works. Typically, if we're doing Comp 2, we are digging into the Cask of Amontillado, or if it's World Lit 2, we're probably dealing with the Purloined Letter. And for American Lit 1, we're dealing with probably Annabel Lee or some sort of poetry in that sense. So, first thing I don't want to do is I'm not going to go into a deep biography about Poe, but I do want to mention something. A lot of people think that Poe was just some really creepy, weird-looking guy just because we're basing that off of a photograph that's almost 200 years old. So Poe he may have been quirky, he may have been a little eccentric in many ways like that. But the biggest, I guess you can say, myth about him was he was a massive drug addict and alcoholic, and that's actually what led to his death. And they even came out with a movie a few years ago with John Cusack, I think, called The Raven. It was entertaining, but it was definitely not based in, fact or anything like that. But no one really knows why he died. They only speculated. And the truth is that his name was smeared pretty hard by a rival. I guess you can call him a rival, but someone who definitely did not like Poe at all, about him having a drug problem and drinking, which actually scarred his name for, decades, if you want to say that. But the truth is that he may have had a drinking problem. I don't know. He may have had something, but we know for a fact that he was not just the, someone who wrote these poems and these horror stories. That's what he's known for. But he was also a literary critic, and he wrote continuously throughout his career. He was always pumping something out, and it wasn't just artistic writing or creative writing. He was writing a lot of theory and a lot of criticisms. As a matter of fact, he was pretty cutthroat when it came to writing about a lot of criticism of the time and a lot of people putting stuff out. So, for instance, he wrote for Harper's Bazaar or something like that, or journals like that. And say Nathaniel Hawthorne put out his collection of short stories. Poe would pick it up, he would read it, and he would write a piece on it talking about how good or bad it was. Most of the time, these things that he would read and write about were bad. A lot of stuff was good, though. We talked about that. As a matter of fact, Hawthorne's Twice Told Tales, including Rappaccini's Daughter, is considered a perfect example to Poe, or was considered a perfect example of Poe of how short stories should function. Nevertheless, he was a critic, and he was a very, very bright, gifted man that could not have kept a job down like that if he truly was an alcoholic or a drug addict. Nevertheless, I wanted to mention that to kind of dispel that, but also to kind of lead into the fact that he was a literary critic. And so when we go into studying his poetry especially, but even his short stories, we want to keep something in mind. Something he's dealing with, he writes about in his big piece called The Poetic Principle. Within this, he really focuses on what we need to be looking for. And so let's put it like this. Let's not say just poetry. Let's just say art in general. But he's mainly talking about poetry right now. But still, broaden it. We need to be able to do three things with that piece of art. Number one, it needs to evoke your emotion, pull your heartstrings, get you emotionally involved. It also needs to somehow, affect your logic, engage your logical thinking, your rational thought. But also it has to get your duty, as he calls it, or your conscience. I'm not saying there has to be some kind of moral dilemma to put you in a bad position, but there has to be something that grabs what is your duty as a human being. Somehow those need to be involved, and when all three are involved and put together, that's what matters, and that's the poetic sentiment, and that's what he's called the poetic sentiment. Anyway, and so when we go on to say something like Annabel Lee, and he even mentioned in it, I think it's in the Poetic Principle, that nothing does all three of those things other than a sad story or poem about a beautiful woman. And that's what we're dealing with here with Annabel Lee, a sad poem about the death of the beautiful Annabel Lee. So I'm going to stop there. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to read the poem. I'm not going to go deep into that, but I did want to give you that point there. Think about how to him, what he wanted everything to go when we also called the unity of effect. And the unity of effect would really focus on everything working together in unity to get that one particular effect across or to the reader. And what he really needs is, he says that we need our emotions engaged, our logic engaged, and our conscience engaged. So when you go into reading whichever story or poem that you're reading for whichever class, go into it looking for that. Look to see how Poe tries to accomplish such a thing, all right? If you have any questions, let me know.